The leaders of the BRICS nations, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, gathered for their yearly meeting in August 2023. The fact that the BRICS have just announced one of the most significant events in the global economy makes this summit historic. The initial declaration was that the BRICS alliance would expand, and that as of 2024, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Iran, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Ethiopia might join. The United States and the rest of the Western world are terrified by this transformation since it would give the alliance control over 40% of the global economy, more than 80% of the world's oil, practically all of the food production, and half of the global population. The economy will suffer greatly as a result of this enormous change in the global order. According to Chinese President Xi Jinping, a nation that is obsessed with preserving its global hegemony has done all in its power to impede the growth of underdeveloped nations. Simply said, the status quo of the US, the currency, and the global system as a whole could change. The world's largest natural resource producers, factories, and inhabitants are all members of this new alliance. Many economists, nevertheless, are pessimistic about the BRICS and doubt its chances of success. The key concern now is what actual implications this will have on the global economy. What does the United States' role in this new order entail? Because this subject impacts everyone and could be useful to you, make sure to watch the entire video. To begin, let's examine what the BRICS are capable of. As you may have seen in my videos, there are three key reasons why the United States is a global force. First, its economy is the largest in the entire globe. They also have the most significant political and military alliances in the world, according to number 2. Additionally, the dollar is the dominant currency worldwide. All of these factors helped the United States become the dominant force in the world during the 20th century. Some prominent instances include the ongoing sanctions against Russia, which were imposed as a result of the 2014 crisis in Crimea, as well as the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. There are, however, numerous additional examples, including Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, and many more. China has an extremely fragile relationship with the United States, despite never having been sanctioned. Brazil, Russia, India, and China made the decision to band together in the 2000s to advance particular viewpoints. After all, these were developing nations with abundant natural resources that were essential to the economy. The term BRIC was coined when these nations started to cooperate on international commerce and political issues. These nations with a lot of natural resources and a sizable population were highlighted in a report written by renowned Goldman Sachs bank economist Jim O'Neill. He thought that by 2050, these nations will be among the most significant in the world. We'll get back to that later. And as time passed, the ties between these nations became stronger. They essentially mimicked the structure of the renowned G7 group, which is made up of American allies. But here's where the important detail enters the picture. The BRICS are not an official entity. In other words, they don't have official free trade agreements, military treaties, or even a hierarchy within the organization. The BRICS initiative is a straightforward platform that fosters communication and ties between these nations. This is an entirely voluntary, non-binding collaboration between the nations. As a result, it may be argued that the BRICS alliance has minimal influence because its members' commitment to it is weak and it is only an afterthought. The fundamental question now is, how do the BRICS pose a danger to the United States? This brings us to the most recent BRICS summit in 2023. One of the BRICS' most important summits in history took place in August in South Africa. This summit covered a lot of really important topics, but the one that strikes out the most is the discussion on future plans. The BRICS coalition has already spoken about wanting to detach from the currency, as you may know from watching my videos. They understand that the dollar rules the global economy and trade. In other words, the BRICS nations are consequently compelled to use the dollar both for exporting their own goods and for importing goods and services. If you are enjoying this video and want to be aware of new videos, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. The fact that all of Brazil's international trade is conducted in dollars irritates Lula da Silva, who has stated in the open that the BRICS alliance needs to find a substitute. oil must be exchanged in a currency other than dollars in order to identify such an alternative, which would require a fundamental shift in international trade. Yes, you might be familiar with the term petrodollar. The term petrodollar simply refers to the fact that oil employs the dollar as its primary medium of exchange for all transactions, including oil quotations, purchases, sales, and even calculations of a nation's oil reserves. Making oil trade in a new currency would therefore be the first step in dethroning the dollar. It is true that efforts to remedy this have been made in recent years. For instance, China has started to purchase oil from Russia in either Chinese yuan or Russian rubles. The same is true for Brazil and other nations. Even though the BRICS alliance now consists of significant energy producers like Brazil and Russia, more members are required for it to begin accepting other currencies besides the dollar. That brings us full circle to the 2023 BRICS meeting. Just recently, it was revealed that new nations would be attending the BRICS meeting. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran are three of the most significant nations in terms of oil. This fantastic announcement created a stir in the media. 1/3 of the world's oil reserves come from just these three nations: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran. The fact that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are both current allies of the United States, countries who previously pledged to sell their oil in dollars in exchange for military backing, sticks out the most. And as you may already be aware, Iran is a sanctioned adversary of the United States, just like Russia, which is currently maintaining friendly ties with American friends. However, the big question is raised by incorporating these oil-producing nations. Could this signal the demise of the petrodollar? Wait a minute. In actuality, these nations are becoming more receptive to taking payments in their home currencies or even in other currencies like the Chinese yuan. However, this does not imply that the petrodollar will disappear. After all, the dollar still rules the world's financial markets, and oil derivatives will continue to be priced in dollars. True, the sale of oil in different currencies does pave the way for the dollar to lose its sway, but this would be a very long-term change. Since neither the Chinese yuan nor any other currency of the BRICS countries is regarded as safe and reliable, the money that Saudi Arabia or any other oil producer receives would likely be switched either to the dollar or another safer currency. It is true that the BRICS nations have talked about developing a new currency to compete with the dollar. Although these concepts have been considered, none of them have been officially announced as a viable future strategy. Both Russia and Brazil have proposed that this new currency would be backed by natural resources such as gold and other precious metals. The BRICS countries' sole notable action to yet has been the establishment of the Shanghai-based BRICS Development Bank. This bank was established in order to counterbalance the World Bank's and the IMF's dominance in lending to poor nations. Typically, these loans are provided for infrastructural initiatives that will aid nations in the exploitation of their natural resources. But even though this bank has provided billions of dollars in loans since it was created in 2014, almost 10 years ago, neither the dominance of the dollar nor the hegemony of the United States have changed. We now get to the crucial question: will the new BRICS coalition be the one to bring an end to the US dollar and the G7? Yes and no, I suppose. Let's start by discussing the justifications for why the United States and the G7 are not doomed. First and foremost, as I've already stated, BRICS is merely a volunteer association with no obligations. It serves as a forum where friendly nations look for common ground to address world political and economic issues. This group is neither a free trade group, nor a military group, nor a political group. As a result, the BRICS group itself has little significance. Furthermore, a large portion of the BRICS members do not get along. India and China are excellent examples. These two economic behemoths frequently clash. These two nations do not currently support one another at the UN or have free trade agreements. For instance, China opposed India's membership as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. The address delivered by Lula da Silva at the BRICS conference this year was yet another crucial aspect. In that speech, he emphasized the necessity of maintaining world peace in order to prevent wars like the one between Russia and Ukraine. He also thinks that women should be given more power and be accorded the same rights as males. This message is severe for nations like Iran, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, and such comments show that the BRICS still need to work together and put in a lot of effort to come to an agreement. And it brings us full round to Jim O'Neill, the economist who coined the term BRICS. Jim thinks the BRICS group is merely symbolic and poses no threat to the US. He said in an interview that while it is odd that Saudi Arabia has joined the BRICS, he does not see these nations as immediate threats to the dominance of the US and the currency. In contrary of what Jim O'Neill claims, this is a critical step for developing nations and emerging powers like China and India. A new group and new crucial players are posing a threat to American global dominance. Remember that the European Union, which functions somewhat like a country and has its own currency, was founded by former adversaries France, Germany, and Italy after World War II. Therefore, it is extremely conceivable that these nations will eventually usurp the United States and the dollar as the world's reserve currency. But rather than an abrupt transformation within the next few years, this will be a change that occurs 20, or perhaps even 50, years from now. That leads me to ask you, do you think the BRICS will be able to dominate the world economy and create a strong alliance? Leave us your opinion in the comments.